This Ventra Pro video will cover the setting up of a tunnel inlet. So we've already added the tunnel inlet, and I'm going to show three scenarios for how you can set up the tunnel inlet, starting with the more complicated way. And there's actually a fourth, even more complicated way that we're not even going to really demonstrate, but we can discuss maybe as we go through the first one. So the first scenario is if we go to the hotkey for our channel 1 where our tunnel inlet is, we can get straight to the tunnel inlet settings, and the first setting is operate as. And under this setting, once we hit enter to go into the edit mode, we can click through the options of temp tunnel only. So that's just using temperature and tunnel mode, then also temp natural. And in the Ventra Pro controller, when it says natural, it means powered ventilation, not tunnel, or sidewall curtain, actual natural. So natural means anything but tunnel. And then what we're going to go with for our complicated setup is having settings for this tunnel inlet or curtain or door to be moved when it's in powered ventilation, natural, as well as in tunnel mode when it transitions into that. So we'll go through and just take a look at some of the settings that we could have on this. If we've set it where it does have a temp natural, the first setting here will be for cool fans, not tunnel fans. So these are fans that are set up as running in cool. They could be cool and tunnel, so they'll count for both sets of settings. But here the 0, 1 means this is our first slot. There's 9 slots of settings that are in here. If we choose to start with a 0 and 0, then it's going to do a gradual change if we have transitions that aren't specified between this setting and the next one, number 2. So a lot of times we start with a 0, 0 if you want it to not open at all until it gets to the setting that'll be next, which will be when we hit the plus key and go to slot number 2, the second setting. In this case, we're setting when 3 of the cool fans are on, it'll open this tunnel inlet 3 inches. So there will be some gradual movement prior to that based on needing to cool the building, but it's largely those first fans will just rely on the other inlets, whether it be ceiling or sidewall inlets that might be open for their providing them air, because any fan is going to produce a certain amount of vacuum in the room by exhausting air, and we need to have the appropriate amount of inlet so that we still maintain a measured amount of vacuum, or what we call differential static pressure in the room. So this is the example of doing this proportionally by the number of fans. It's going to change the opening sizes. So this case we have the tunnel inlets. As we were looking in here, we looked at the second setting of 3 and 3. The other settings I've just changed all to 0 and 0. So the ones you're not using, all 9 of these slots the ones not used need to be set to 0 and 0, or else it's going to be trying to make some other adjustments, possibly things that you don't want. And when you first add this device, there are numbers populated in there for different numbers of fans and opening sizes, and not necessarily matching your inlet. So we just make sure they're set to zeros, and then it's our option whether that first slot has a 0 in it or whether it doesn't move at all till it gets to that opening size that you'd put in for 1. You'd do for number 0, 1, you could do 3 fans and you're 3 inches, but do it on that very first slot, and the rest of them would be 0 and 0. You certainly could have other steps of where the tunnel inlet's being used for your cooling. The next thing that it takes note of is are the cooling opening sizes proportional, and we are saying yes, they are. Then it'll go to the tunnel fans, and you can do the same kind of a, at number 1 we're going to go at 0 and 0, and this is meaning fans that are designated to run in tunnel. They could be tunnel and cool or just tunnel only. The number of them once you're into tunnel mode. So in this case, the tunnel mode starts at 3 or 4 fans on, and so the first real setting here is at 02, where it's going to open it to 4 inches. At this point, it's closing the other inlets when it goes into tunnel mode, so we want to make sure that our opening size is appropriate. The next proportional setting that I put in here was for 4 fans, 14 inches, 5 fans, 24 inches, 6 fans, 48 inches, which is the full opening size of our curtain. And of course, that tunnel inlet or curtain isn't going to have to change when you add evaporative cooling. It'll stay based on the number of fans that are producing that exhaust vacuum in the room to keep that, because obviously if the static pressure gets too high, the fans have to work too hard. If it gets too low, the air doesn't move the way it's supposed to. So that's how we would do that. We get both cool settings and tunnel settings in here then. Then you can interlock fans, and there's up to 9 interlocks. That's the part we're going to just not use. We'll just choose to use all fans for our interlock, which means it's just going to count up the number of available cool fans or tunnel fans that are used for those opening sizes that we put in. So that's the more complicated approach. You could actually have each of those steps in your, you'd still have to fill out those same steps of opening size, but now you can lock it to a fan, specific fan, although you can do the same thing by just counting up how many of them you have and putting in the appropriate number above. So the simpler way is just to leave that at all fans. Tunnel opening sizes are also proportional. We have a full opening size of 48 inches. Knowing the full opening size and now the full travel from to full open from full close is 4 minutes and 19 seconds. The same is for full close, to go from full open to full close. And that can be a little different if you stopwatch these and make sure that these are accurate. The benefit of that is that if you've tape measured the full opening size and you've timed it appropriately, then 1 inch will be 1 inch, and a half inch will be a half inch, and 4 inches will be 4 inches. Otherwise, things could be kind of skewed. You think you have a certain opening size and you don't. So it's important to get that right. And here's a nice way to make sure that you have adequate opening size when you're entering tunnel. So the Ventra Pro will transition into tunnel mode as it's closing the sidewall inlets or ceiling inlets and then opening the tunnel inlet. During that period of moving those inlets, you can have a target size for the tunnel inlet to go to, and the same for when it exits. So it makes sense for the 6 inches here is based on trying to make sure that if you've got a tunnel curtain that it doesn't suck with the fans going and not enough inlet. If that static pressure gets too high, it can suck the curtain against the wall and hold it up, even though the actuator is allowing it to, or curtain machine is allowing it to go close. So that's just something to keep in mind. The reason the exit size is 0 is because when it goes out of tunnel mode, you probably don't need an opening size because you're going to less fans, and it shouldn't be as much of an issue. You could always use that. Another setting is the resync. So at a certain time of day, so let's say we want to have it do this at 10 o'clock at night. Well, now we got to remember we hit enter to go into edit, and then I just went to the left one to get on the hours. So for 10 o'clock at night, we would not set it at 10. We would set it at 22 because everything in here is on a 24-hour clock. So what a resync does is that if this inlet has not made it all the way to full close or full open, at which time it leaves that channel on for an extra amount of time to make sure it's calibrated. It's at that point of 0 inches or full opening size, in this case 48. It'll make sure it's at the limit switches of the curtain machine. If it hasn't been there in a 24-hour period, it will resync that at 2200 hours. So it's a nice feature to make sure that you've had it, it gets back to where it should be, and we have that built in here. And then as we go down, we come around to the top of the scenario again. So this is kind of our more complicated scenario. A simpler one would be if we choose here to just have this run on temp tunnel. So now the tunnel inlet's not being run until you're in tunnel mode. And now below, there's no cool fan settings, just the tunnel fan settings that we put in before. So those are all in here. And after we get up to, in this case, I've only got 6 tunnel fans. We're full open. Then after that, everything has to be set to 0 and 0. We also have the ability to interlock again, just for tunnel mode, and then proportional or not, which just means that it's using those fan numbers to go to the opening sizes. And our full opening size, our run times for full open, full close are in here, as in our transition size and our resync. So all those things, it's just a little simpler. Now there's a third way that's even easier. If you wanted to run your tunnel curtain based on static pressure. And so for that, we're just going to go to System Setup and just quickly add a static pressure sensor, because those menus do not show up for the, and we'll put that in module 1, channel, let's just put it on 8. I won't have one in here in actual fact, but now that I've actually added one, if we go back to our tunnel curtain and we have another choice in here to just run it on static natural or static temp tunnel, the combination. So again, you could have 2 different modes. You could have this thing operating in a natural or temp tunnel. Most likely, if you're doing static, you're just going to do static tunnel only, so that the static pressure when it's in the cooling mode will be controlled by your other inlets. You could have those run by static. So this would be the typical way to do this. Again, we've got our opening sizes so that inches are inches and everything, and our other settings with our resync. And then we also have the ability to add a static pressure pause timer, so you can add some number of seconds or even minutes to allow the static pressure to normalize, so to speak. So with that, we've got a simpler way of doing it, because now it's just going to open that tunnel inlet to maintain a certain static pressure target that you choose.